Today, we are going to discuss block 1, week 4, and this week we'll talk about psychological insights and the individual differences. You know that I am different from you, you are different from me, so there is individual differences. And these individual differences may let you be more innovative, may let you have more creative ideas and try to implement them. We are going to know about the individual differences. We are going to begin with two approaches. The first approach is the idiographic approach, and the second is the nomosistic approach. And we try to know about personality characteristics. Then we are going to discuss additional two things, which are please guys, if anyone use the mic, please try to mute yourself, please. We are going to study after this. Guys, please, if anyone use the mic, please try to mute yourself and don't open the mic till the end of the lecture. And we are going to have your questions after this. Okay. We are going to study after that the entrepreneurial mindset and the entrepreneurial skills. Thus, we are going to study three things: personality characteristics, entrepreneurial mindset, and entrepreneurial skills. Entrepreneurial skills. Okay? And we are going to start with the first thing, which we are going to discuss, the personality. Before we are going to discuss the personality, we'd like to know what do you mean by human capital. If you'd like to innovate, if you'd like to do something, this relates to human capital. Human capital consists of three major things: personality, mindset and values, and skills. And we are going to start first with the personality aspect. We are going to differentiate between personality, mindset, values, and skills. And we are going to start with the idiographic and nomosistic approaches and try to know how psychologists try to explain phenomena, try to describe certain categories or certain terms or certain approaches. The first approach we are going to discuss is the nomosistic approach, which has been based on the research of the scientist Kant. And this approach tries to deal with objective things, try to deal with natural science. This means what? If I said that the sun rises from the east, this is a fact. This is an objective thing. This is natural science. But there is another approach, which is the idiographic approach. And this is also based on Kant work. And this idiographic approach is concerned with dealing with subjective phenomena, dealing with culture, dealing with uniqueness, dealing with differences and subjectivity. And in most of our psychology, we deal with subjectivity. This is why we can use the idiographic approach to study the individual, to study why you are unique from other person. Why? If there is something that differentiates you, yes, there is something that differentiates you rather than others. And if I'm going to use the ideographic approach, I can use it to describe this difference and explain why people sometimes like to learn about the stories about successful entrepreneurs. On the other hand, I can study why people sometimes don't like to learn about this using this ideographic approach. And this is why here, this is different from another approach, which is the nomosystic approach. Because the nomosystic approach tries to deal with facts. It deals with finding dependent and independent variables that can be related to a certain phenomenon. This is why I can search in depth about your child birth, about your education, about the timing and how it can affect your education pattern and so on. I'm going to search here in the relationships. There are a lot of principles for nomosystic approach. And nomosystic approach try to see the personality traits and behavior and study these traits and behavior. For example, if I'm going to study the intelligence level of certain individual, what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure it. I'm going to determine it. This is why I am going to think about a tool to measure this intelligence level. And I am going to use this tool to judge about certain mental state of certain individual. Thus, if the employee will pass certain intelligence level, he or she can be accepted. If not, he or she will not be accepted to join the company. This is why most of the companies now try to use the IQ test to hire people. And this is a great criticism about this, about the reliability of this test. Sometimes you are intelligent, but you are not able to answer the questions in the proper time. And at this time, the company will judge you that you don't have enough ability to learn, and they are not going to hire you. And this can be a problem for you. Away from approaches, we can go to the first component of the human capital, which is personality. And personality here had been studied from different researchers, and they try to adopt the nomosystic perspective. They try to identify different dimensions for personality. They try to identify the relationship between these dimensions and the outcome of the behavior of the entrepreneur. What does it mean? I am going to come up with different dimensions and try to measure the relationship between these personality characteristics or these personality metrics and the success or failure of a certain entrepreneur. Thus, if you have, for example, certain characteristics like extrovert, for example, maybe you will be a successful entrepreneur or not. They are going to detect the relationship between each personality dimension and the success or failure of the entrepreneur. How this can take place? This can take place by using a certain model which we call it the 5-factor model or the Big Five. And this model tries to illustrate 5 personality traits. This model tries to come up with this dimension in order to help people to predict the relationship between these personality traits and the success or failure of the entrepreneur. What are these dimensions? These dimensions are extraversion, which means that the individual is sociable, expressive, communicate with individuals easily, outgoing, optimistic. This is what we mean by extraversion. Another personality trait is neuroticism. And here, if there's an individual who is very anxious, who is emotionally unstable, who is prone to depression, he don't like or she don't like to discuss things with people. He or she will not like to make relationships or communicate with others. This is neuroticism. Agreeableness, this is another personality trait. And it means that all the people like this individual. You are liked by others. You are easy to get with them. Consciousness. Consciousness means hard working and means reliability and conformist. You are hard worker. Another characteristic, which is the fifth one, is openness to experience. It means here you are very eager to learn. You are innovative. You come up with different solutions to problems, and this can affect the successfulness of the entrepreneur. A lot of researchers try to investigate if these 5 characteristics or 5 personality traits are the only personality traits that can help us to judge if the individual can succeed or not. And they try to know if there are other traits that should be considered or not. And they try to think, if you are in your childhood and you can imagine if you had been raised in a certain manner, if this certain manner will affect you when you become adult, how this can affect you? If it can affect you, how it can influence your actions, how this can take place. And they try to come up with different aspects of personality. Like what? Like if our childhood can affect our self-identity and behavior, it can affect us. It can shape our behavior. The social role of the parent or the teacher can affect the behavior of people, can affect the way they are influenced or not. And they deduce that the big 5 are influential, but they are not only the one component. There are other factors that may interfere. And this is why they try to come up with the other factors that may interfere. They come up with additional 3 personal characteristics. Like what? Like locus of control. Here, the individual, as an entrepreneur, try to see if you can control yourself or you'd like someone or a certain situation to control you. This is why most of the entrepreneurs try to control themselves. There is an internal locus of control, while there are others try to let situations control them. And this is why we have external locus of control. Another characteristic that they found, in addition to the 5 or the big 5 that we had mentioned, is self-efficacy. And here, self-efficacy means how you see yourself, how you believe about yourself. Are you capable of making demands in variety of contexts or not? This is self-efficacy. Another characteristic, which is self-esteem. And here, how you see yourself. You are worthy enough. You feel that you are worthy enough. And because of this feeling, this can affect your success or less as an entrepreneur or not. You should determine this. Despite all of this research, there are other people who try to assess the value and relevance of these approaches. And it is important to bear in mind that there are three assumptions that we should consider. The first of which is some individuals have certain psychological characteristics that are associated with the entrepreneurial behavior, either in the present or in the future. You have certain characteristics that affect your behavior, either now or in the future. And despite this considerable popularity, these approaches is challenging. Sometimes you cannot apply the approach by all of its characteristics because there is individual differences. The second thing is the characteristics are relatively stable over time. This means what? They are not fixed all the time. Sometimes there is a change. You can look for yourself. If you have been raised in an Eastern society like us, and you have traveled to the US, do your characteristics will be permanent? Are you going to change some of your characteristics or not? Yes, sometimes they will change. Why? Because this can change over time, but still this change is not a big change. They are relatively consistent because they differ from one society to another, from one setting to another, from one class to another, but there is no major difference. The third thing that researchers are able to isolate certain characteristics, but in fact, realistically, we cannot isolate a characteristic from another because you are one individual. You cannot separate the characteristic that you choose from other characteristics. It is difficult in reality, but it can be done in research. I can say, okay, I'm going to separate the extraversion characteristic, separate the locus of control from all the other characteristics and see the effect of it only, its effect on the entrepreneurial success. This can be done in research, but it cannot be done realistically. If you are going to do this realistically, maybe there is interference of the effect of the other characteristics. This is why we have entrepreneurial characteristics, limitations, and applications. And there are a lot of arguments about limitations and applications. Here, you find that most of the psychological studies try to use non-comparable samples. This means what? I am going to take a sample from the US, for example. This sample should be compared to the same size or the same number of people that should be involved in another research study in the Eastern society. Otherwise, I cannot compare the US samples to the Egyptian samples. They should have the same size. If I'm going to take 3,000 from the US, I should take 3,000 from Egypt. And try to let the conditions the same. This is if I'd like to compare. But if I'm going to compare without using the same size, without using the same categories, this will be difficult. This will be difficult because here they use non-comparable samples. Another thing, most of the studies and researchers try to investigate the successful entrepreneur behavior. Thus, there is a bias to study successful entrepreneurs' characteristics rather than the entrepreneurs who have failed. Sometimes there are entrepreneurs that have failed. You should study their behavior. You should study their characteristics. You should study their traits. And you should know that possibility of observing certain entrepreneurial traits are the product of entrepreneurial experience. And this is what research had depended on. But due to all of these limitations, it is difficult to interpret the results because sometimes researchers hadn't used comparable samples. Sometimes they investigated only successful entrepreneurs and leave entrepreneurs who had failed. Sometimes they try to assume that the entrepreneurial traits are the product of entrepreneurial experience, and sometimes they are not. This is why there is a limitation. At a more fundamental level, there will be wide variations among entrepreneurs. They make attempt to develop certain standard psychological profile, and this is impossible. This is useless. We cannot develop a certain standard psychological profile as a researcher. Why? Because in fact, it cannot happen. This is why it is useless. Thus, given the continuity of interest in entrepreneurial personality, it is worth to consider criticism in more details and try to talk more about limitations and applications. The first thing that we are going to talk about is there are problems in defining and operationalizing the concept of personality characteristics. Why? Since researchers have identified a lot of characteristics and tried to correlate between these characteristics and the entrepreneurial behavior. But still, they didn't identify the cause and effect relationship quite well. They cannot say that extraversion can affect the successfulness of the entrepreneur in so and so. They just come up that it can affect, but how? How this can happen? Till now, there is no sufficient research about this. For example, we can take another characteristics like desire for autonomy. Desire for autonomy, some people require more autonomy at a certain point, and others require less autonomy. As a researcher, I should study both of the ways. I should study when people need more autonomy and when people need less autonomy. And I should see the effect of this on the outcome, on the successfulness of the entrepreneur. Thus, here, this cannot be identified in research. This is why it is difficult for researchers to establish causal relationship between the individual level characteristics and the outcome and the organization. Why this is difficult? Because it's something subjective, something I cannot measure, something related to social behavior. You can look at successful social and commercial ventures, which had been founded by different individuals. Some of these individuals lack the certain characteristics that we talk about. Lack, for example, risk-taking propensity, lack desire for autonomy, lack locus of control. This is in fact what happens. But you in research talk about the effect of locus of control on successfulness of the entrepreneur. And you find that there are other successful entrepreneurs who don't have this personality characteristic. This is a limitation. Why? because you suspected something that may not happen. Thus here, we can find another thing, which you can find a lot of people had this personality characteristics. They had the locus of control, they had the need for achievement, they are extrovert, but they are unsuccessful entrepreneurs. This means that sometimes there's no relation between these personal characteristics and the successfulness of the entrepreneur. And this can be one of the limitations. The second limitation is there are problems with the measure of entrepreneurship as an outcome. I can measure the outcome by the actual behavior of the entrepreneur, by the intention of the entrepreneur. But what you are going to measure is your observation. And the observation can be a product of multiple factors. Thus, this can be explained in terms of interaction of different number of people. And this can let us think that the entrepreneurial attitude in a certain point of time may be affected by additional factors rather than the factors that assumed by researchers. Why? Because the individual is not in isolation. The research had been made in isolation, but realistically, the individual is not in an isolation stage. This is why this can be a limitation. For example, self-efficacy. Self-efficacy seems to be associated with success of certain entrepreneurs, mainly in the early startup phases of entrepreneurship. But there is no sufficient research available that explores the long-term application or the long-term implications of self-efficacy on entrepreneurs in later stages, in the maturity stage of the firm, in the exit stage. There is no research found about this. They just make research that confirm that self-efficacy is associated with the business initiation in the startup phase, when you start your venture. But at the other stages, there is no research. And this is a limitation for the research. They should do more research about other stages and how self-efficacy can affect this. The third thing is much of the characteristics that have been identified in the literature provide no definition for entrepreneurship. And this is the act of founding and controlling an independent and commercial business venture. This means what? This means that there is an opportunity for researchers to know more, to have a broader definition of the entrepreneurial behavior, to do more research, try to investigate the social and the commercial entrepreneurs, not to concentrate on social entrepreneurs only. Also, they should go beyond the individual level, and they should investigate the team level, because the entrepreneur will establish a team and they work together. Thus, I should detect this team and the behavior of this team. Thus, researchers had a lot of work to examine the psychological characteristics of the entrepreneurs that are related to success, to come up with different researches at different levels, try to update the way they interpret the personality and personality characteristics. This is about personality characteristics. The second thing that we are going to discuss today is the mindset and value. And this is the second element of the human character. And we'd like to know, what do you mean by mindset? In a simple word, What is the mind? It's the tool of thinking, how you think. Okay? This is very closely related to your ideas, your interactions. Sometimes it has been affected by your personality. That is to say, it is impossible to take an outcome. It is impossible to take an outcome such as you are going to be successful because of a certain mindset. No. This mindset should have certain mapping for the outcome. Certain mapping to the outcome. How I'm going to be successful? I should think about this. I should come up with ideas that maybe in the future will be fruitful and can be implemented. And by this way, as an entrepreneur, I can succeed. This is why the mindset is related to different perspectives on individual differences. And this had been established by Carol Duke, which is a researcher, and she had distinguished between individuals who had fixed mindset and individuals who have open mindset. They have the ability to grow. They have the ability to change their mind. They have the ability to interact with the surrounding environment. Thus, people who have fixed mindset means that they are going to have stable intelligence. And if you believe that you are going to succeed with a fixed mindset, at the dynamic life we are going to live now, it's very difficult. This is why you should have open mindset. You should have growth mindset. You should be capable to interact with the dynamic environment we live in. You should face that challenge. Those companies who faced the COVID, they try to adapt to the situation. They try to deal in the time of COVID. They are eager to achieve. If you have a certain fixed mindset, this will be a problem because you are not going to achieve anything. You should interact with the surrounding. This is why these alternative mindsets can affect the consumer behavior. And this is why the notion of a mindset is applied in more general terms without categorizing it to different types. And the Quality Assurance Agency for Higher Education, which is a very known organization, tried to come up with a summary of the entrepreneurial mindset. Why? Because they'd like students who learn in schools and in universities to be entrepreneurs in the future. And this is why they try to study. They try to come up with different characteristics for the entrepreneurial mindset. Among these characteristics is the aspect of personality and social identity. I should know about the personality of the student. I should know about his or her personal ambitions, his or her personal confidence and resilience, if he'd like to try again, if he failed or she failed or not. I should know about his self-discipline, how he is punctual in his appointment or in her appointment. I should understand their motivation and their ability to go beyond the limitations they'd like to achieve. They'd like to tolerate the uncertainty. They'd like to react. They are going to respond to the risk. Even we are in COVID, but there are certain students who are keen to achieve higher grades. They have their personal values, and this is why you should understand their personal values, their environmental awareness. This is what this organization had come up with. Why all of this? Because we'd like to reflect how our mindset is relevant to a certain challenge or a certain situation, how our emotions can influence our decision making, how the emotional aspect can be a factor that should be considered among the factors that affect the entrepreneurial behavior. In contrast to the notion of mindset, we have another notion, which is values. And values, simply, we call it belief. Why beliefs are important? Because they can guide our behavior. They can guide our action. They are very persistent. Sometimes you cannot change a belief of certain individual. Why? Because this needs a long time to take place. It is influenced by experience and relationships. Thus, if you are raised in a certain culture, like our Eastern culture, we have certain beliefs that tell us we cannot do this because we are females, for example. If you'd like to change these beliefs, you are going to take a long time to change this. This is why beliefs are not easy to change. Values are not easy to change. You can consider also how values are related to emotions and feelings. Because sometimes you are going to feel happy that you do something. Why? Because it is something related to your culture. When you do this, you are satisfied. But if you do against this, you are dissatisfied. Okay? This is why this can be a problem for you. You are unhappy if you act against the value. Thus, for example, I might have a strong value associated with the need to keep my promise. And another value can be based on the need to live in a green economy or in a safe environment. However, I should compare between my values. I should prioritize my values. Take another example. If you'd like to meet your friends, you have two options. You have to take your bicycle, and another option, you have to take your car. But when you make the appointment with your friends, you agreed to meet at 5 p.m. Now it is 4:50, and there is about 300 miles, or let's say by time there is about 30 minutes from your place to the place of the meeting if you use the bicycle. And if you use the car, you are going to take only 10 minutes. If you prioritize this meeting, if you evaluate the appointment of your friends, you are going to take your car and run to them. But if you don't prioritize this meeting, and it doesn't mean a lot either to arrive on time or late, you can take the bicycle. This means what? This means I am going to prioritize. I am going to make this prioritization as an individual, and it differs from one individual to another. This is why we have a theory which we call it the theory of basic values. And this theory tries to let you know about 10 values. The first value is the self-direction, which means what? I am going to direct myself. How am I going to direct myself? I should be independent. I should depend on myself. No one will help me. I should be creative. I should explore ideas. Another value is stimulation, which means I'm going to challenge what happens. I'm going to succeed. There is another value, which is the third value, which we call it hedonism. It means that I am going to have pleasure. That everything I'd like to do, I should have pleasure in it. I'm not going to work in a place that doesn't give me any pleasure. I can search for another place because I'd like to please myself. The fourth value is achievement. And here I'm going to talk about recognition and rewards. Here I'm concerned about my way of reward. If there is a certain monetary reward or there is a kind of respect like recognition. Power. It is another value. It means that you'd like to have control over others. You'd like to be manager. You'd like to have authority. You'd like to be in a certain status or a certain class in the society, because by this way you are going to have power over others. The sixth value is security. And here you are concerned about your safety or living in a safe society, safe country, have safe relationships, and so on. The seventh is the conformity. And here you are concerned about respect the expectations of others, respect the expectations of your family, respect the expectations of your society. This is conformity value. Tradition, which means that you are going to accept cultural issues in your society. You are not act against them. Benevolence, it is the ninth value. And it means you are going to act for the welfare of a certain group, welfare of your family, welfare of your society. The last value is the universalism. And here you are not going to act for only the welfare of your family or your country. You are going to act for the welfare of the world, all over the world. These are the 10 values. And we should here prioritize these values. Which value I evaluate more? I evaluate security, I evaluate benevolence, I evaluate stimulation, I evaluate power, and so on. I should prioritize which value had more rank rather than others for me. This notion of values had become very important. Why? Because if I know this prioritization, I can expect the entrepreneurial behavior. I can expect what will happen in the future. I can expect if this entrepreneur will be innovative or not. The last component is skills. And the term skill means ability, means competence. And here, if you have certain ability, this can affect your success or not. Definitely, it can affect the outcome. It can affect the way you succeed. It can affect your action. It can affect how you respond. And this is very important. This is very important. For example, I am going to judge that a certain entrepreneur or a certain driver is a skilled driver. But this skilled driver differs from another skilled driver in another country. Why? Because the driving test is different. Because you cannot judge a certain entrepreneur as a skillful without seeing the measurement, how you judge his skills ability or her skills ability. Okay? It's very important that I should here judge the skills ability of the individual before I am going to judge if he is skillful or not. Thus here, if I am concerned about certain skill, I should know how this skill can be learned, how this skill can be developed. It doesn't mean that you are talent by nature. Sometimes people are talent by their nature, have this skill by their default, but there are other individuals, other entrepreneurs learn certain skills, learn how to think using open mindset, learn how to respond to reality fast. They develop their skills. Thus, if you don't have the skill, it will be no problem. You can learn it. You can develop it. How I'm going to do this? I can learn from an expert, or I can learn by doing. Thus, novice entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs can learn. They cannot depend on their innate talent. They can learn new skills. And this is why Green in 2011 proposed that it is useful to think that the skill as a personality quality is productive. It means using the skill is productive of value. You can expand your skill. You can enhance your skill. How? By training. You should have social skills. You should communicate with others. You should have networks. And this is why it is important. Also, Green had come up with different distinguishes between different types of skills. There are cognitive skills. What do we mean by cognitive skills here? It depends on the mindset of people. Here, I'd like to develop their thinking ability. This is what we mean by cognitive skills. And you should have interactive skills. What do you mean by interactive skills? Interactive skills means communication skills. You can communicate with others. You can communicate with your colleagues. And physical skills, which means your strength or power. You are able to carry large weights. This means that you have physical skills. I should distinguish between these three types of skills. There is another thing that we should consider. How you can develop your skills. Sometimes the community you live in can be the way that lets you develop your skills. Like what? You are a student in the Open University. And the Open University will give you a lot of resources to study and try to develop your skills. How to use the online media to learn, how to interact through the chats, how to use the LMS, and so on. Thus, here the community you learn in, try to develop your skills. Sometimes the society, sometimes life can let you learn and develop your skills, like problem-solving skills, in order to continue your life in the proper way. Here, we have been exposed to a lot of skills, like the communication skills, people management skills, team skills. Why we are exposed to this type of skills? Because if you are going to be an entrepreneur, you should communicate with the team. You should be able to manage the team. You should develop the team skills. You should interact with your customers. You should be result-oriented. You should solve the problems that may face you. This is why we are concerned about the skills that should be found in the entrepreneur. The QAA highlighted the importance of learning outcomes for students. in terms of their attitudes, behaviors, and skills. They try to see or suggest that education can help students to be more intellectual, to have certain practical skills in order to help them in the future. Why? Because the student should be creative, should be innovative, should learn how to capture opportunity and recognize opportunity, should learn how to be involved in a decision-making process. This is why we give you sometimes team projects to develop this skill. Sometimes in the team project, you'd like to communicate with your colleagues. This is why you should have communication skills. You should have interpersonal skills. You should also know how you interact with the team leader. And the team leader should know how to manage the team of the students and so on. This is why this can develop creativity and innovation. This can let you come with multiple solutions. This can let you come with different opinions, okay? And this can let you change sometimes your mind. They come with, they here means the association here comes with different headings and try to evaluate issues and make decisions in situations of ambiguity, and try to know how uncertainty can affect the behavior of the entrepreneur. Try to detect if networking skills, your ability to communicate and form networks with your colleagues can help you to succeed or not, can help you to have more ideas which are new ideas and can be implemented or not. This can also let the organization know if there is a kind of opportunity recognition that can be found in students or not. Because if you are able to recognize the opportunity, you are going to think how to capture the opportunity, how to implement certain new idea, how to gain certain financial outcome. And this can let you be successful an entrepreneur. This is why they are going to concentrate on the mixture of these skills that can help the entrepreneur to be successful. The mixture of skills. What are the mixtures? What are the mixtures that should be available in certain entrepreneur in order to be successful? This is why there are certain studies that come up with certain questions and try to summarize the debate around skills. Some of which is Switzer et al. 2013, and this study had come up with 4 key questions. The first question is, do entrepreneurs need to be generalist or specialist? For example, if you know in medicine, there is a general practitioner. This general practitioner, physician, can see you if you have any pain and try to help you to get rid of this pain. But sometimes the general practitioner says that you need to see certain specialized physician. Why? Because I don't know specifically in this disease. You should have another opinion from a specialist. This is what happens also with entrepreneurs. If you are generalist, you know about a lot of things. This can help you to succeed sometimes, but in other circumstances, you should have certain specialization. For example, if you are going to work in the pharmaceutical industry, and you don't know specifically about this industry. You just have general idea by the rules of the game, but you hadn't practiced this before. What will happen? When you start your venture in this industry, you need to refer to someone who had experience in this industry, who have certain skills in order to let you succeed. Okay? Another question. What is the balance between innate talent and the acquired talent? We talk about skills. For example, you come born with a certain skill. You are by nature very effective in communication with people. This is something innate because you're born with that skill. But if you are not, and you'd like to be a successful entrepreneur, what will happen? I can learn this skill. And at this time, I call it acquired skill. I should learn it, I should develop it. Thus, if there is a balance between this, yes, there is a balance between this. There is a balance between the innate talent and the acquired talent. And it should be present. Why? Because this can affect you as an entrepreneur. So there is a complexity. Yes, there is a complexity. Why? Because sometimes I am not able to acquire this skill very well. But I'm going to try again and try to let my level in this skill high enough, like the other entrepreneurs who have innate skill. They have the skill or they have the talent and born with this talent. They are communicative by their nature. They don't like to learn more about this. The third question is, to what extent do successful entrepreneurs pursue an international strategy of skills development? Or does an endowment or award approach based on personality trait lead to a natural aptitude of skills endowment? In order to answer these two questions, we should know that. First, do personality or mindset have a critical role to play, influencing the extent to which individuals seek to develop the right skills? If I have certain personality, this can help me to develop certain skills and can hinder me to develop other skills. Yes, sometimes this can take place. You should think about that. Yes, personality and mindset have critical role to play in influencing the extent to which you are able to develop the right skills. This is why companies try to measure the IQ test, the mindset of people, their ability to learn before they join the company. Why? Because this company can let you have a training in the future in order to develop certain skills. If you have low IQ level, this means that you are not able to learn, and this will cost the company a lot, and sometimes you are going to lose your job because you are not able to develop the right skills. The first question is, how much of success is down in human capital rather than social capital? We should know the difference between human capital and social capital. Human capital means what? Means what? We have three elements, huh? Personality characteristics, mindset and values, and skills. But the social capital means the effect of the society. The question here is to understand what are the causes for success. It is because that I have very strong human capital, or because that the society helps me to innovate. The society tried to facilitate things for me in order to be productive. This should be considered. This should be considered. Why? Because certain societies pave the way for people to succeed. And this is why the success can be as a result of the social capital, not the human capital. Sometimes the culture will help me to succeed. And this is the effect of the social capital rather than the human capital. Thus, in conclusion, we should know that we have discussed the elements of human capital, which are personality, mindset, values, and skills. We had tried to identify several personality characteristics. We studied the 5-factor model or the big 5 model. And then we tried to add additional 3 characteristics to the big 5 in order to justify the behavior of the entrepreneur in order to be successful. This is our week today, and now we are going to stop recording here and we are going to listen to your questions.